The new drivers for this season have all hit the shelves, but don't be fooled, now might not be the time to buy one. Now, buying a brand new driver or golf clubs is great, and if your budget affords you to be able to do so, then go for it, as long as you're not looking to tick off all the three things that I'm going to share for you now. New driver, baby. So the first thing that we want to talk about is the differences from year to year of each release. One thing that is great about new driver release season now is that manufacturers aren't making wild claims anymore. As the consumer, we're pretty switched on to know that they're not going to be 10, 15, 20 yards longer. And it's more down the forgiveness aspect that we're seeing a little bit of improvement. But how different actually are they from generation to generation? I've got two drivers here, the current Mizuno STX driver and one that was released in 2021. And I'm just going to put them both to the test with some shots to see actually how different they are from generation to generation. So we're going to start off with the Mizuno STX 230, which is in the current lineup this year. And what I'm expecting to see from 3 years difference from 2021 lineup, I think it'll be about 4 or 5 yards difference in terms of total difference. But the big difference is what happens when the ball isn't struck out of the centre, and I think that's where we'll see less curvature and we'll see a little bit of a tighter front to back distance. So let's hit some shots and then we're going to bring the other model in as well. It's definitely a draw driver. Take that for straightness. So now we're going to move on to the original Mizuno STX after hitting the 230 model. And I think the big difference, what you do see from generation to generation, is what I would call refinements. It's just little detail changes a lot of the time, whether it's the way the paint looks, the way the weight placement is on the bottom of the head. It's just we had to get this one out for market, and as we've looked back on it, we've reviewed and we've decided that actually this would look a little bit better, or that would have been slightly better in this position. We're not seeing massive jumps, but it'll be interesting to see how this goes. Like I say, I'm expecting about 3 or 4 yards difference, but then it's what happens on those misstruck shots that is the big key, I think, nowadays. Looks a heck of a lot more offset back behind the ball. That was a poor shot. Definitely not as straight. I can tell you that for nothing. So I've hit some shots there, and interestingly, looking at the data, they're so close side by side, these. The actual carry distance, which I think is where I was expecting to see that 3-4 yards, was nearly spot on. The actual 2021 model went a yard further than the current model. The offlineness was a little bit more offline. Now that's human error, but what I would say, looking at the ball flights when we saw those, I felt like it was a little bit easier to get the newer model straighter, as where the older model looked a lot more offset to me, which is where I talk about those refinements from a player's standpoint, whether that is feedback that the companies get and then they change that. I was fighting really hard to try and get that working straight, otherwise it was going to go left. So it just goes to show there, 3 years difference in those heads, and there's not much in there. So when should you maybe think about changing it? What year gap would actually be a point where you say, well, actually, I think technology might help me? Now, if you have a driver that's over 5 years old, I would suggest that now could be the time to maybe look at changing it. With the technological advancements that companies do put into the new drivers, we will see some differences. And if you get up to the 10-year mark, then yes, it would be beneficial to you and your game to actually upgrade that driver. Let's take a look at another thing that might be a reason for you to avoid buying a new driver. With the cost of living rising and everything generally getting more and more expensive, another thing to consider is, can you get some older stock and save yourself a little bit of money? Take for instance, TaylorMade QI10, a fantastic driver last year. Now if you just have a little scout around on the internet, you'll find that you'll get these for $399, and I think from memory they were $499 when they came out. £100 back in your pocket. And that's the same with things like the Titleist driver, the TSR2, I found this at £349, the Cobra Dark Speed at £329. And as we saw from the little test I did just a moment ago with those two drivers, it's not light years away from the new model to last year's model. So I think you have to ask yourself, how much money are you willing to spend to gain 1, 2, 3 yards, or a 2% more of forgiveness? Is there a bracket of maybe £50 should see 1, 2, 3 yards, £100 should see 5 to 10 yards? Or is it just a case of don't let your ego get in the way and maybe buy last year's model knowing that it's pretty much like for like? But if you really wanted to save some money, what you can do is go a little bit further back in the range. Take for instance the Mizuno ST Max, the current model, £399. Now, the STX, which is still running but is a last year release, that is down at £229, so it's £170 back in your pocket. But if we were to go a few years back to 2021, we would find the original Mizuno STX, and you can find that brand new for £208. So that's even more money back into your pocket. And we know, yes, the technology has advanced, but has it advanced that you're willing to spend £170 on it? Let's take a look at another thing that may be a reason to avoid the new release drivers. Brand new draw driver in hand. This is going to solve all my problems. Ah! It is very much slicing. And that is another reason why you should maybe avoid buying that new release if it's claiming it's going to fix the problems and that's what you're buying it for. Now, due to the weight placement in this driver, it is draw biased, and that is where I see a lot of golfers buying golf clubs thinking that they are going to be the miracle cure to their problems. I've lost count of the amount of lessons that I've given when they've said, well, what do you think about this new draw driver? Or I've got a draw driver, why am I still slicing it? Well, if we deliver the club something like this, where we're glancing across it, we're hitting down on it, and we have a poor strike location, there isn't a golf club out there in the world that will fix poor swing mechanics. That's down to us as the golfer. That little weight placement there might remedy some of the issues. It might help us straighten it out ever so slightly, but it's not going to eradicate that shot. Now, one thing that I wish would happen in the golfing industry, instead of new driver release season, golf coaches would have new lesson release season. Round a similar time, they release their best offers that they do. It might be that if we took into account the price of these new drivers, let's say £499, you could buy a package that included an on-course lesson, 10 swing lessons, a short game lesson, and a mental lesson. And that would be more beneficial to you as the golfer, because like I say, if you're delivering this golf club in a certain way and it's producing a certain ball flight like we see from the shot there, the golf club isn't going to fix it. So If you are thinking of buying a driver to remedy a certain shot that is plaguing your game, what I suggest firstly is going to see your local PGA professional. You don't have to spend hundreds and thousands upon golf lessons. It might just be one lesson, and they could give you some little facts about your golf swing and what your tendencies are, because your tendencies with your old driver, guess what? They're coming with you to the new driver. But if you can get a lesson and fix them, and instead of maybe cutting it like we saw here, -9 degrees, and you now only cut it something where it's only going to cut 3-4 degrees, what we're going to see is that ball flight just straighten out a little bit more. Might only cost you £60 for that one lesson, £30, who knows? But we can see there, by halving this now, I've actually got the ball in play, and it wasn't a change of golf club, it was a change of delivery. That helped me remedy me missing the fairway and that big slice. And here's a little bonus tip for you. The majority of drivers nowadays come with detachable heads. So before you think of buying one, I hedge my bets that a lot of people haven't been refit for the driver that they bought maybe a year, 2 years ago. Go and see a good fitter or a PGA pro, and they could actually tweak by using the little systems that they all have nowadays, where you can change loft, you can change lie. You could actually get that current driver optimized for your golf swing now. Instead of shelling out hundreds and hundreds of pounds on a new driver, just go and check to see, well, is there anything that we can do with the current model? It might even be a new shaft, which sometimes is a lot cheaper than buying the whole driver. But 3 things there that I think you should do before just buying a new driver and expecting it to solve a lot of problems for you. As well, guys, why not watch this video here to see that you've got the right irons in your bag? Subscribe so you don't miss videos like this one and the driver video in the future.